In today's video, we're going to look at the red flags that you should never ignore in a man. This video is there to keep you safe. When we're talking about red flags, we're talking about the things that make me worried about your physical or emotional safety. So really important that you know what to look out for so you can make sure that the guy you're interested in is someone that you can trust and that you're safe with. All right, let's dive in. So the first thing to say is that we all have our own individual preferences. There are things that I would be okay with in a relationship that you might not be okay with in a relationship. And that's completely fine. But it's also important to recognize there are some things that really we should never be okay with. And these are the red flags. So you have your own preferences and you have your own boundaries, and those are things we're going to talk about in other videos. But red flags are things that are always a problem, or almost always a problem. The first red flag we're going to look at is when you realize that he's always talking down his exes. Now, we've all got that ex, the partner who was just dreadful. And we have ridiculous stories about how awful they were. And quite often these are kind of funny. We're not talking about that. Everyone has someone that they've dated and really wish they hadn't. But if every single one of this guy's exes is somehow a psycho or dreadful or has just been the worst person in the world, that worries me. Because, first of all, if he was dating them for this long, there's chances are that person had some positive qualities. And he seems to have just completely erased all of those positive qualities from his memory of the person. So it's a sign that he's starting to rewrite history. Also, someone who puts down all of their exes doesn't really seem to feel any compassion for them. And if he's referring to them as psycho or crazy, it's not a lot of respect there. Even when you've ended a relationship with someone, there should at least be some baseline level of respect. And again, we all have that one ex, but this isn't about that. This is if it's a pattern where he does it, where he says this about everybody that he's dated. It's also important to note that if he's talking negatively about most of his exes or even all of his exes, it's probably a sign that he's not willing to learn and that he's not looking to improve his own behavior. When a relationship breaks down, it's rarely entirely due to one person. So if he's interpreting the relationship breakdown as being entirely their fault, that he did nothing wrong, it's possible. It's possible that he's a saint, but it's more likely that he's just unwilling to address any of the problems that he brings into the relationship. If he talks about all of his exes in a really, really negative way, unfortunately, it is a sign that you might be the next psycho ex that he describes. And we don't want that. The next red flag we're going to talk about is that he dismisses your thoughts, your feelings, or your experiences. So this is a little bit like mansplaining, but it's just taken to the next level. It's when you tell him, oh, I felt like this, or I had these thoughts, I was thinking this about this, and he tells you that you didn't. Now, that might sound strange. It feels like a slightly strange thing to do. After all, why would you tell someone that they didn't feel what they felt or that they didn't think what they thought? The only person who knows is the person who's saying. But some guys do this. And it's not quite gaslighting. We're going to get into gaslighting a little bit more later, but it's certainly well on the way. There's an arrogance to it, and there's a sense that your emotions aren't really important to him. If he's more concerned with telling you what your emotions are than he is with listening to you about what you're feeling, he's not really treating you as a person, and he's certainly not treating you as an equal. And that's not a good sign for the future of your relationship. The next red flag is that he creates a rift between you and the people you love. Again, there is a little bit of nuance here. You might have people in your life who aren't actually good for you. You might always come home from seeing your best friend feeling a little bit down and as though it's been all about them and you haven't really felt heard. You might have family members that you really don't want to be around, and a healthy partner will say to you that you don't have to be around that person. You don't have to put up with bad behavior from the people you love. It's a red flag when it seems like he's starting to create a rift between you and everybody you love, or a significant proportion of the people you love. When someone starts to create rifts between you and the people who are important to you, whether it's deliberate and actually abusive, or whether it's a sign of their own insecurities, what they're doing is reducing your support network. They're reducing the number of people who can back you up, who can give you a second opinion, who can tell you honestly what they think of your relationship with him. You need those people, because if he starts to isolate you, he's able to manipulate you in a way that he can't if there are other people around you trying to protect you. A guy who really wants to be the center of your world might seem like it's romantic or exciting or a gesture of love, but actually it's quite often isolating you and making it harder for you to reach out if things do start to go wrong in the relationship. So we mentioned gaslighting briefly earlier, but I'd like to go into that in a little bit more detail. Gaslighting is when someone attempts to make you doubt yourself. They might tell you that your recollection of events is wrong. They might tell you that you didn't do something you know you did, or that you did do something you know you didn't. What they're doing is they're shifting the ground underneath your feet. They're making you feel off balance. They're making you wonder whether you're losing your mind. If you haven't ever experienced it, it's hard to understand how that would work. After all, if someone tells you that you put your keys in the fridge and you know you didn't put your keys in the fridge, surely you would just assume that no, they're being abusive and they've hidden my keys in the fridge and they're trying to mess with me. But when it comes from someone you love and they are so adamant again and again that your mind can't be trusted, it's actually surprisingly easy to start to believe them. It's often easier to start to believe them than it is to fight for your own understanding of reality. Now, if you think that the person you love is starting to gaslight you, that's not just a red flag. That is an entire town's worth of red bunting. Gaslighting is abuse. And more importantly, gaslighting is the step that softens you up for later abuse. If you think someone's gaslighting you, first of all, you're probably right. And secondly, it's probably time to get out of that. Another red flag that you've probably heard of is the idea that if your date is rude to the waiter, it's not a good sign. That's true. It's absolutely true. If a guy is rude to a waiter on a date with me, we are not getting a second date. That to me is just unnecessary, it's rude, it's disrespectful, and it says something about his character. But when we're talking about red flags, being rude to a waiter once doesn't have to be a red flag. It might just be a bad day. It might be that something else has been going on. What I'm looking for in terms of the red flag, the thing that worries me, is if he is cruel. And specifically, if he's cruel to people who are powerless relative to him. So that's where the being rude to a waiter comes in, is that there's no need to be rude. There's just no need. It is an attempt to make somebody else feel little and small and humiliated, and he's only doing it because he is in a position of power relative to them. If he's cruel to people or things that are powerless relative to him, if he's cruel particularly to children or to animals, that to me is an enormous red flag. That tells you that he is only kind if he thinks that it's important to him. He's not kind and protective and caring in a more general setting. I think that someone talking differently about someone behind their back than they do to their face is a little bit of a red flag. Sometimes it's a red flag, sometimes it isn't. There is a little bit of nuance there. If he meets your mum and he's really lovely to her, and then on the drive home he says that actually he didn't really like her and it was a bit of a stressful meeting, that's okay. He was being polite and being sociable. That that's not a huge deal. But someone who is gushing to people's faces and then rude or nasty, again, we're back to them being cruel. If he's like that behind their backs, that's a sign that you can't trust him. Do you know what he's saying about you behind your back? How can you be sure? That's kind of worrying. Angry outbursts are another huge red flag. An angry outburst where he's shouting or screaming or throwing things, or absolutely worst of all, is actually violent. That's something that you should never be putting up with. If someone's violent to you even once, that is a huge red flag. You never have to tolerate any form of violence and any form of anger directed at you. Not if it's that kind of outburst. He can be angry. We all get angry. That's fine, but his anger shouldn't be scaring you. And if it does, that's a sign that he doesn't have full control of it. And that's worrying. So now we're getting on to the more abusive end of things. Now, obviously, someone who's having an enormous angry outburst and throwing things or being violent or shouting at you and calling you names, that's obviously a problem. That's obviously abusive. But there are also slightly subtler signs that someone might be abusive. One of those is that he tries to control you. So this might be that he tells you that oh no, don't wear that. No, that's too revealing. Don't do this. He starts to decide what you do, and that's not his decision. He can make a request, he can make a suggestion, he can offer his opinion, but if you don't feel that he respects your decision as yours, then again, you have to ask yourself whether you're safe emotionally. You need to be respected and you deserve to be respected. And those are hugely important. And the same goes for someone who belittles you, someone who tells you that you're not very bright, someone who tells you that you're always making mistakes, someone who criticizes you, someone who leaves you feeling worse about yourself as a result of spending time with them. You don't deserve that, and you don't have to put up with that. So it can be quite a heavy topic. We're talking about red flags, we're talking about relationships that are deeply unhealthy, and it's quite unpleasant when you realize that you can see some of those red flags in your own relationship, or that the guy that you've just fallen head over heels in love with might actually not be someone that it's safe to be in a relationship with. So if any of this video has hit a bit of a nerve, take care of yourself, and that you do some self-care, whatever that means for you. I'm sure I'm going to do a video soon on what self-care is and how you can do self-care right. Do what you need to do to look after yourself. And if you have got any thoughts, if there are any red flags that you think I've missed, please put them in the comments section below. I'm sure you guys have loads of ideas that I haven't mentioned today. And please do like and subscribe. We're going to have loads more videos coming up soon. So I'll see you then. Bye.